Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. We'd love to hear back from you. Where did we get it right? Where did we get it wrong? You can do that on unsilentpodcast.com or on Rumble comment section or any of the various social media channels. Not on Blue Sky, though. We're not on Blue Sky. So, Brian, I don't think we have an account there. I don't. So there you go.
I don't.
So what's you've got some things that have been percolating in your shiny skull.
Something's been floating around my tiny little brain. So first, I want to alert you of a major change is coming. So I got a couple things that are like more serious, but as I'm prone to do, there's a goofy kind of thing that I thought I'd throw at you to kick things off.
Sure.
I almost mentioned it last week, the week before, that it's been eerily silent on the climate change front.
Yeah,
like
it's true.
Eerily, like they're just that has been pushed so far into the back burner over the last several months that it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's competing theories. There's a notion that the sun hit its apex of like how much heat it produces and solar radiation. I'm not a scientist. But there's like ebbs and flows and how much heat it produces.
Sure.
And over the last, 80 years, we were at a surplus of heat, and now we're going into an era where there's going to be less. And sure enough, right on time, there's a new study from Chinese and American scientists warning of an incoming ice age. So we've made the full swing now. So in the 70s, I think it was the ice age. Then it went to global warming. Then it transformed to climate change, and now we're going back to an ice age is coming. And this is a credible source. I don't.
Yeah.
This is not just some guy in his basement tossing this out.
Right.
So much like the paper bags, remember paper bags were the thing in the 80s, and then paper bags were bad and you had to use plastic. And now they charge you in the state of Washington, for example, to use plastic, and paper bags are cool again.
Right.
Like I noticed a trend with these ecological things. Like we just kind of run a merry-go-round of whatever we're doing currently is not right, and we have to be taxed more to fix it, whatever the solution is.
Well, that I think that's the formula. I think that is exactly the formula. What we're doing is wrong. It doesn't matter what we're doing, but whatever we're doing is wrong. Yeah. And it's going to destroy the world. And so therefore we're going to change it. And then wait 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, whatever it is. What we're doing is wrong. We got incremental taxes because it's like bell-bottom pants. It's like,
it really is.
It's the same as bell-bottom pants.
Except they don't tax you more for not wearing bell-bottom pants and then tax you when you are wearing bell-bottom pants. Like that the increased taxes every little piece of the cycle is a critical element of that whole formula.
Although we're probably going to have to edit the show because we don't want to put out any other ideas about what they can tax people for, because I could see the bell-bottom pants tax coming down the pike.
Well, in your state,
in Washington, Washington, if it moves,
real careful.
If it moves, it's taxed.
Yeah. All right. So that's the kind of goofy but serious kind of thing. But stay tuned. I think that this the coming ice age is going to be the new flavor for the next handful of years. And then,
Brian, I'm in good shape then because I still have a VHS videotape called "The Coming Ice Age," and I think it's narrated. I don't know if it's by Leonard Nimoy or
Leonard Nimoy. Yeah, I think it's Leonard Nimoy. Yeah.
I think it was Leonard Nimoy, and it showed the picture. And I still have that. I have a VHS player. So we'll bring that out and play it for a future episode.
Much like bell bottoms, if you just wait long enough, it'll be back in style.
It's going to come back in style, yeah. There you go.
This would be like your version of pieces of vinyl, like old records, like
yes, exactly.
Pieces of VHS that it tried and true to concepts that just got shuffled away over time, but now they're ever more prescient.
I'm a trendsetter. You just got to wait 30 years because I say the same thing all the time. In 30 years, my trends will come back.
Oh my goodness! All right, so. The other two things I want to talk about are much more serious. That one, it's kind of serious because it's gonna be the entry point into regulation and tax.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay, but anyhow, the climate wheel is spinning. So, the other thing that this has been kind of noodling around in my brain for a while, and it kind of came to the forefront about a week and a half ago. So George Santos is a guy that history will be lost to history. I'm fairly certain.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and for people listening, Dave and I are trying to explain to future generations, 70 years from now, as they look back and wonder what the hell is wrong with us, like we do for the people in the World War II era, whatever. What it's like to live through this moment is what Dave and I are trying to explain on things that don't necessarily make the history books, right? I think George Santos is a guy that is not going to make the history books. So my recollection of the events with him is he was a New York House of Representatives member, Republican, busted telling a whole bunch of things that were just flat out not true, like things that were easily provable not true. So I'm not saying I'm a fan. I'm not saying he's a credible guy. I'm not saying any of those things. But he was, and I think they kicked him out of it. They censured him or kicked him out of Congress. I don't know, something like that happened. He left Congress 4 months after being elected, or 6 months after being elected, or something like that. Some version like that, right? And he was convicted of some kind of campaign funds fraud.
Yeah.
All right. And he was sentenced to 7 years in prison. And then he turns himself in a couple months ago to start serving his 7-year prison sentence. And word starts coming out that he had spent 41 days in solitary confinement, which, for people who, know anything about criminal justice and punishment and all that kind of stuff, solitary confinement is one of the worst things you can do to a person. People legit go insane.
Yeah.
Right? It's the most terrifying and scary. It's all the bad movies of the gulags, there's always a solitary confinement element, right?
Yeah.
The most hardened criminals come out of, when Sammy the Bull Gravano talks about his many, forays into prison, he cites the solitary confinement as being the part where you're really question if life is worth living, kind of a thing.
Right.
So I think the version I heard is something like Trump hears that he's being given solitary confinement for campaign funds violation.
Right.
And basically says, all right, well, if you're going to treat this guy like that, it's not, the punishment doesn't fit the crime, and commutes his sentence.
Right.
And so, boom, next thing you know, Santos is out of jail. Now, I'm not for or against him going to jail on campaign finance charges. I'm not for or against him being commuted. I think I'm against him being solitary confinement for that, unless he had some kind of egregious behavior, which there's no indication that he did. He wasn't shivving people in the shower.
He doesn't seem, he's not, he doesn't seem like a fearsome, from what I can remember.
Yeah. All right. So then you start looking at, so you have a guy at that level, at this everyman level, that guy gets punished to the fullest extent of the law. You look at things like January 6th, the FBI and whoever else was able to track down every grandma that was within 2 miles of January 6th in the far reaches of little towns in the middle of nowhere in Alaska.
Right.
And little, 800-person towns in the middle of Wyoming. They were able to track these people down, out in the middle of, they live in nowhere.
Right.
And they weren't even on the grounds on January 6th. They were just in the vicinity. They get locked up. A lot of them put in solitary confinement, by the way. And their lives are ruined. Right. Now, again, I don't know if they legitimately committed crimes or not. I'm not speaking to that. But when you look at things that are really damaging to our country, really catastrophically damaging, I would use examples like the GFC, the Tuskegee Airmen experiments, the MK Ultra stuff, the JFK assassination, Benghazi, COVID, Epstein. You look at all these different things like that. I don't ever remember hearing anybody go to jail for those things. The GFC, my little tiny brain, I don't understand economics that well, that macro level. Somebody somewhere was doing something that was probably wrong, like in a criminal way, not just bad business, but in a criminal way. I don't remember hearing of anybody going to jail for that. I don't remember hearing anybody going to jail when the MK Ultra stuff came out in the 70s and all that stuff, and even in the 90s. How is that possible, Dave? So my question for you and I to ponder is this a unique thing to our system of government, or is this just the kind of thing that always happens when you put people in charge of things?
Well, that is, I think, the $1 million question there. Is this unique to us, or is this a common? I mean, I think the common thread among those things that did not receive any kind of punishment, shall we say, or justice, or all the things you mentioned, is that they're so, we hear about too big to fail. There's in a lot of those, it's too big to prosecute, because they're so big that the nefarious actors seem to get lost in the woodwork. But again, the ratcheting, going back to your point, is they tracked down people from January 6th and had amazing sleuthing skills to find the people that were quote unquote guilty of things in January 6th. Why couldn't they find people that in these other things? I mean, there's some of them that are even more egregious than others. I mean, you might say with the GFC that there was some kind of bizarre conglomeration of government and banks and all of this, twisting the system so that it failed. So maybe it was a systemic failure, but there's ones like the Tuskegee Airmen. There's no. I mean, they will point to systemic failure. I think in all of these, people will point to systemic failure, but there's got to be players in there. There's got to be players in there someplace that push the buttons in the. And the other part of that is like with the GFC or with the Great Depression or with any of those, monstrously bad financial events, there are people that, as many people have been hurt by them, there are lots of people that fantastically, succeeded as a result of those things. Fortunes were made from the GFC. Fortunes were made from the Great Depression. And we don't find, at least to my knowledge, we don't find a ton of people being held accountable and saying, no, this is not really right that you have made all this money on this. Well, there's that show on, I've started to watch it, Billions. Have you watched that show, Billions?
I think I watched a couple of episodes, but it never really hooked me. I think I watched a little bit of it, but I don't think I got into it.
The reason I reference that is because in the show Billions, one of the people in there made tons of money by escaping the Twin Towers or not being in the Twin Towers when all of his company was destroyed, and shorted a bunch of stuff and became a multi-billionaire as a result of 9/11. And so there's people in those scenarios.
Yeah, and to that point, like that thing specifically, there is demonstrable evidence there. You can see the option chain activity where somebody like 2 days before 9/11 bought millions of dollars of puts, meaning they were basically shorting the airline stocks 2 days before 9/11, and they made an obscene amount of money. And then on September 13th or whatever, when the markets open again, they sold, and they made an unbelievable amount of money. Now, again, the same guys who can find grandma in Nome, Alaska, I'm willing to bet that they could find out who placed that bet and do some. The size of the bet and how far out of the money they were betting. So, like, let's say the airline stock was $100. They bought these puts that like. The puts were worthless unless the stock got down to like $20, and then they made just a fortune. I mean, they're so far out of the bets they were making were so far out of the norm and so monstrous in size. It could be a coincidence, but it's if it's a $10,000 bet in Wall Street, like you're just doing like random YOLO kind of haymaker, jackpot hoping wins or whatever. Like, okay, fine. But millions and millions of dollars, they made like an obscene amount of money. So that person clearly knew something about something.
Well, and it seems to me that and it could very well be that the knowledge of in these various situations was, and in fact, I'll mention something about 9/11 specifically, the knowledge in those situations of who nefarious players were or who dropped the ball. Well, maybe it's not nefarious, but maybe it's who dropped the ball, but they still should be held accountable. It's there. I'm sure it's got to be there. I'll give you one example that I've heard from. This is not on what's the guy's name who got one of those little far out conspiracy podcasts or shows. This is some mainstream research of folks that found that there was plenty of information of 9/11 indications, things that were going to happen that would cause 9/11, that the CIA and they were trying to, they produced the receipts, they produced the programs, they produced this agent, this agent, this agent, this agent. And, as soon as you start talking like this, people, oh, you're conspiracy theorists. No, this is just stuff that's reported in like mainstream publications. Yeah. And yet, and it's very likely that nobody did that. Nobody did anything to stop it, not because they were nefarious, but because they were covering their butts. And so it happened, and but you can't rock the system. I think the conclusion to that, in my mind, is that nobody gets held accountable, whether it's nefarious or whether it's a failure of people to do their jobs properly, because to do so would rock the system. Too big to prosecute.
Yeah, so like that, and I'm not suggesting that every one of these examples somebody should have gone to jail. I'm not suggesting that. I've heard many of the stories of 9/11 where the CIA had their insiders and the FBI had their insiders, but because of how they silo things and they're super protective of their information, they don't trust each other, they don't share information. It's like, okay, it's a crappy system, but nobody was like in on it. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So like 9/11, okay, I can understand if. And maybe the person who made that big bet on Wall Street, like they just heard about it and they're like, well, I might as well cash in. But they weren't in a position to do anything about it. Okay, fine, whatever. I'm not suggesting that somebody had to be prosecuted for every one of these things. What I'm saying is, if you put all these things together, from the JFK assassination, the Tuskegee Airmen, the MK Ultra, 9/11, the WMD in the Iraq War, the predicate to go to war there, COVID, like all these things, if you put them all together, nobody's ever been prosecuted.
Yeah. No, I think that's
the part that seems to me like, I don't know.
Well, and then what do you conclude from that? And you look at the level of trust in our institutions, our level of trust in Congress, and our level of trust in administrative institutions, et cetera, is at dismal levels. I get a kick out of those things that say, well, dog poop is more popular than the House of Representatives.
Congress rates right above syphilis and right below stepping on dog crap or something.
Exactly. And so that tells me then that things of this nature are just obvious to regular people like you and me, and still folks can get away with it because they're, again, I think, too big to prosecute. Well, we can't upset the system. If we prosecute X person, then it's like that Jenga game. You pull it out and the whole thing comes crashing down. Right. And if you know that, if you're the person that knows that you're that, block in Jenga, that if it gets pulled out, then you're going to take liberties and you're going to do things to enrich yourself potentially because you can't be prosecuted. Not because it's not against the law, but not because you didn't do something wrong, but rather because the consequences of prosecuting those responsible, or at least in some way holding them accountable, is too great to the systemic health of a corrupt system.
Yeah, there's a line that I can't define there. Like Bernie Madoff went to prison, and I think he died in prison, if I remember right.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
he died in prison. Okay, The Wolf of Wall Street, he went to prison. Those guys, made a shit ton of money. There's no question, but they weren't in on the deep, dark stuff. They were doing things. They were doing what. And again, I don't even know. I know what a Ponzi scheme is, but I couldn't cite the law that's being broken. I don't know the legal terminology. Same with the Wolf of Wall Street. I get the gist of what he was doing, but I don't know the legalese of specifically what law he broke, and I don't get all that stuff. But my point is, those guys were ultra wealthy people who did go down. But there's a level above them that, again, I can't quite quantify or describe what the difference is, other than you're either in on the game or you're part of the game. If you're in on the game, you're safe, and if you're just playing the game, you're not safe. Is the best way I can articulate it. I don't.
Well, and I mean, if you look at guys like Bernie Madoff, prosecuting him didn't threaten the system. It didn't threaten the system at all. So you can, in fact, prosecuting him, you could argue that prosecuting Bernie Madoff was actually a help to the system, because you could say, well, nobody's above the law, nobody's too big to be held accountable for doing this evil. When and so it's not necessarily the person who gets prosecuted, but whether or not they're that, I'm going to go back to that analogy, whether or not they're that Jenga piece that threatens the entire, we talk about the blob or, the books I've been talking about recently, the machine. If it threatens the machine, if you do it on your own and you can be prosecuted for doing something wrong and it doesn't threaten the machine, you'll be prosecuted. But if you're an integral part that exposes a weakness in the machine, if you expose a corruption in the machine, threaten the institution, then you will not be prosecuted because we can't have the system being challenged.
This is, by the way, I think this is bipartisan.
Totally,
right?
Yes.
Like the Epstein thing is a great illustration of this, because when Biden was in office, it was all the anti-Biden people were like pushing for disclosure,
right?
And the argument was the likes of Bill Clinton and Biden supporters and donors were being protected, and that's why there was no disclosure. Now Trump's in office, we still have no disclosure. He's downplaying like the necessity of like doing disclosure, which I think you and I have talked about this before.
Yeah, that's just
like stubbing your toe unnecessarily from my perspective. Now, I don't understand DC politics, and I'm sure he has advisors way smarter than me. But from my perspective, like, this is a layup unless you're on the list, which I don't know. I mean, I tend to think he's not, but what do I know, right?
Sure.
I think if he was, they would have, when they were,
somebody would have found that and put it out there. Yeah,
$4,000 fraud in New York. They would have done this as well. Anyhow, but now that the Republicans have the Senate, the House, and the White House, and now everyone, like Trump not disclosing it, now it's he's protecting his people. It cuts both ways. COVID is another example. There's more and more evidence coming out that people were saying things to the public during COVID that they flat out knew was not accurate. That, I mean, whether you look at young kids in school, whether you look at business owners, whether you look at average taxpayers, whether you pick a cohort in the United States, except for very wealthy people, everyone got just crushed during that period, except for it was the largest transfer of wealth in history from middle class and poor people to wealthy people.
Yeah.
Everyone got crushed except for that top, 1/10 of 1% or whatever. And Trump was in office when things happened, and Biden was in office when things happened.
Right.
Zero, like not even a sniff of anybody being held accountable for anything that where they knowingly said a thing that was just absolutely not true. And there's more and more evidence coming out like regularly. This is not like this stuff is not even like secretive anymore.
Right.
Again, you can look at that when George W. Bush was in, like the WMD, when Ronald Reagan was in, Iran-Contra. Like there's plenty. There's Republican guys who are like nothing happened, and then there's plenty of things during with Clinton, like the Benghazi thing and the email scandal. Like this is bipartisan.
It's totally bipartisan.
With red and blue. This has to do with you're in the system or you're at the mercy of the system.
Yeah, it's all back to the system. It's 100%. It's back to the system, and the people that get rich are the ones that understand the system well enough to understand what they can do to enrich themselves. So you look at people who've gone into public service, quote unquote, at the congressional or at cabinet level, et cetera, and they go in average net worth, they come out multimillionaires. So those must be people. Those are people that understand the system well enough, so they understand what they can do that is wrong that they can get away with. And so, and the system itself is the only way you're going to change that. You're not going to prosecute. You're not going to prosecute people that threaten the system. The only way you can do that is the system itself has to change, or you have to end up with the system being challenged at a fundamental level and collapsing. So that's, this idea of oligarchs. I mean, I'm very much a free market guy. Make your fortune, go for it. If you can make billions, do it. On the flip side of that, I think we've got the wealth inequality and the wealth distribution, which I hard to hear myself even say that, because wealth is earned, it's not distributed unless it's distributed, unless it is parceled out, and opportunities and money are parceled out based on your position in the system, which makes you an oligarch. And so it's the right or the left, either one.
So I guess my underlying question is, so it's a long-winded setup. My underlying question is, I also, like, we hear bits and pieces of things like North Korea, where all of a sudden a general that's been a trusted advisor for 37 years just like disappears.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find out a few weeks or months later, he was accused of being a traitor. Like he was, you know, capital punishment, like these horrific, like gruesome methodologies and things like that. So you're in the inner circle there until you're not. Then once you're not, like you're just taking
all the way out.
Similar things happen. It seemed to like in China, where all of a sudden, like a top general or top admiral, like they're accused of being a traitor, and like they're just toast, right? So we see it there. So my question is what we're talking about, like the unraveling that happens during the fourth turning and the slow deterioration of what do we call them, institutions. In this a uniquely Western thing with the fourth turning cycle you and I talk about a lot, or is this just how it goes when people govern things, that if you're in the in crowd, you're pretty safe until you're not, and you never know what it's going to be, and this is just how it goes when people rule over other people?
Well, I think it's number two. I do think it's number two, because you look at the Roman Empire. I mean, everything always goes back to analogies of the Roman Empire. So Julius Caesar, the most powerful guy in the world, until he got shivved by the Senate. He was
33 people or whatever it was in the Senate conspired against him and killed him in the hallway.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But again, these things happen. These things tend to happen where power is concentrated among the elite, as it was there, as in each of the examples you mentioned, power was concentrated or is concentrated among the elite. And so, and it doesn't matter how elite, you could be the emperor of Rome and still fall afoul of the system, and it crushes you. That's where
you could make a case that he was in the top 10 most powerful people that ever lived.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I mean, he brought about that empire.
He still pushed it too far and got taken out. So.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I just think that is a meaningful part of the era we're in, where I think people are just more tuned into this than I ever remember.
Yeah.
And I don't know that anybody ever sits down and has conversations like you and I are having, like this level of detail.
Yeah.
I think it's just something that we just have an abstract awareness of. We're just like, things just aren't right. And that's kind of where the conversation kind of lives and stays.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's inching more and more towards that we just can't. It can't be like this, right?
Yeah.
So the other topic, which is similar and kind of adjacent to it, like one of the things that Trump is now pushing, as I mentioned, he's pushing against the release of the Epstein stuff. Like he's just dismissing it. Like you guys are letting those dastardly Democrats distract you with this bright, shiny thing. And what you really need to be paying attention to is how they ruined the government by doing the government shutdown or whatever it was. A couple before the shutdown, there was another thing that they were, this was distracting away from the real problem. Right. And then again, Trump is a confusing guy to me, because sometimes I think he just says random stuff just to see what the reaction is. And then he's like, okay, that was, people like it. That's a good idea. Or people hated it. That's a bad idea. I think there's part of that.
Yeah.
But he's kind of stepped on his own toe this last week in unnecessary and kind of jarring ways that are really riling up his base. So, for example, he threw out this notion of a 50-year mortgage.
Right.
And when the way he announced it was he put a picture on social media that showed FDR and Trump, and the headline was "Greatest Presidents Ever." And then under FDR, it said, 30-year mortgages, because that's where the 30-year mortgage came from, was the FDR era.
Yep.
And then under Trump, it said 50-year mortgages. And so this this grand idea, and his base absolutely is revolting. They're like, you are absolutely on the wrong track here.
Right.
Why don't you make housing more affordable rather than just letting people pay an extra $500,000 in interest for an extra 20 years mortgage to save $237 a month? It's just asinine or arguably stupid. It just makes no sense for who he's trying to serve.
Right.
And then the second thing he did this week was, well, there's three things. The Epstein thing is he's dismissing that, hey, the real problem is the Democrats shut down the government, which nobody really cares about. This 50-year mortgage, throwing that out there. And then he said that there would be stimulus checks, similar to our COVID $600 checks, stimulus checks to share the wealth of the tariff income in the amount of $2,000.
Right.
And okay, so stimulus checks seemed like a good idea to some people back in 2020. there were some of us, now again, I'm not bragging about this, but just basic economics, you get $600 and it's pretty foreseeable that the amount of money you're going to spend more in fuel, housing, groceries, utilities, it's going to well exceed $600 to fund that with inflation or whatever. More people are now aware of that because they got the $600 check, and then they're still paying 30% more for car insurance and 25% more for housing and whatever more for fuel. And so he throws this out there, and they're absolutely revolting about that. And I don't know what's happened here. What's your take on what? First of all, why is he doing that? And like, is this just him throwing random stuff out like we talk about him doing sometimes, or is there like a deeper meaning behind it?
Well, part of me wonders, well, he's a real estate developer. That's his background. Part of me wonders whether he thinks just so much like a real estate developer that the more debt you can get for the cheapest cash flow you can get it for. I mean, he built his entire fortune and career and everything on debt, right? I mean, that's everything. So part of me thinks, well, but that would also say that he's disconnected from the average folks, because we've got, in terms of consumer debt and defaults on consumer debt and late payments and all of that kind of stuff right now, it's very, very high. And so the average person does not respond well to saying, well, now we can just make your debt even bigger and wouldn't this be wonderful, and that makes me a great president. So I think there's that. And then the other side of that, which is fascinating, is, of course, FDR was a populist president. He was a Democrat, but he was also a populist president. But he was on the left-hand side. Trump ostensibly is on the right-hand side. I say ostensibly because he's a populist, not a conservative.
Yeah, he's a Bill Clinton era policy guy.
Yeah. So so when you look at those things, he's completely missed the notion of what the average person has pushing their buttons every day, and actually ends up contributing to the exact opposite of what he was elected to do, which he knows, which was the blue collar workers, the steel workers, the auto workers. All of these are the folks that we're concerned about immigration, we're concerned about manufacturing going away, concerned about their jobs being lost. They're concerned about the high cost of living, and then he floats those ideas. Is there somebody? Is there? I mean, and I don't know. Is there somebody that is whispering in his ear things that are just completely irrational? And why the change in course? I would think that he would understand that this is a change in direction, right?
Yeah.
This is not one of these things is not like the other from Sesame Street. Which one is it? Well, this one is not like the rest of these things you've been doing, and you seem to sort of be undermining your own kind of brand. And then, of course, with tariffs, it's like, we're going to give you $2,000 of money for as a result of the thing that is costing you more money, because everything costs more because of tariffs, because tariffs are a tax on the American people. So, yeah, it's baffling to me, Brian. It really is baffling to me.
So the Epstein thing speaks to the thing we just spent 30 minutes talking about, where people are having, I think we have more awareness of the unfairness of whether or not you're in the game or at the mercy of the game.
Yeah.
And so the Epstein thing is like the thing people are holding on to, like, this is going to resolve this. And he campaigned on releasing the Epstein information.
He did.
Right. So that's a 180 on a thing that, it's this, for whatever reason, that's the thing people have sunk their teeth into, on the disparity from the people who are in the protected sector versus those of us regular people.
Yeah.
And so the 180 there, he's pissing people off, because this is the thing they've hung on to, right or wrong. Right. This is the thing they've hung on to. If our tax dollars are funding organizations through NGOs or other governments to create a Jeffrey Epstein, and then hurting our young children, especially our young girls, in the most heinous ways to get control over foreign policy, I think that's just something people just, like, they really care about. Again, it's the thing they've sunk their teeth into.
Easy.
Right? then all those things you said were true about on the economic front. Things are unaffordable, and then there's this constant drumbeat of AI is going to replace your job in 5 years. Like everyone's just like this, just constant drumbeat of like you're not going to have a job in 5 years, and we have no idea what the future is going to look like.
Right.
And we're in this AI race, and we hope we beat China, but nobody knows how anybody's going to live after this.
Yeah.
So your jobs are all in jeopardy. Best case scenario, they're in jeopardy, or it's all but certain you won't have one in a few years. But here's your $2,000. And by the way, things just keep getting more expensive every time we do this. Oh, and by the way, we have $37 trillion in debt, which at some point we're just going to have to default on or inflate away and just make your dollar even more worthless than it is today.
Yeah, and what's staggering, I think, about all of that is indeed the off-brandedness of the whole thing for Trump. Is the demographic is different that he's talking to with these things. And so if it's so off-brand, if it's so outside of what he ran on, the norms or the messages he ran on, then does that mean that the machine got to him, to put it that way, or did the blob sort of subsume him? Or did the blob have something over him?
Right.
And because it kind of feels like it. It kind of feels in those cases that the machine has gotten control and has said, okay, you've had enough. You've had, 10 months now of your doing these things. Now you got to kind of move back into machine territory again.
Yeah, and it's unfolding in a odd way. So in New York, they just elected Mamdani, who is a self-described democratic socialist, which is a nice way of saying socialist.
Communist.
Right? Communist, yeah. I would argue that that's correct. So people who are progressive, that's the avenue they're going. What's happened this week with all the people who are railing about all the things you just said, like has Trump been compromised? Like what's going on? The flavor I'm picking up from it, my interpretation is Trump was like the conservative Hail Mary to hopefully solve this problem. Yeah. And now he's in on the game, or he was corrupted, or they got in by some whatever.
Right.
He's not going to do what he said he was going to do. And like, they're just deflated and defeated. And so they're kind of, I don't know if I'd say abandoning him, but they're really like, what the hell is going on? Essentially is like the thing. And they're going to be searching for a different answer, kind of like the progressives are searching for a Mamdani.
Yeah.
The conservatives who had all their eggs in the Trump basket, who are now like, wait a second, this is exactly the opposite of what we wanted. This is all the things Biden said he was going to do that we voted against, right? And then you have the Epstein thing, which is the fairness of the in crowd versus the out crowd, and then you have the economic thing. And I saw something that said that when countries or nations hit 130% debt to GDP, that is where revolutions happen, civil wars happen, like they collapse. Like this is where collapse happens. And we currently are, depending on who you listen to, we're at 122% or 124%, somewhere in that ballpark. So we're encroaching upon this debt to GDP level that historically has a very good track record of like where bad things happen. And so whether you're conservative, you're reacting in one way. If you're progressive, you're acting another way. But everyone is abandoning the hopeful people. Like they're abandoning Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and Nancy Pelosi on the left.
Right.
And now they've already abandoned many Republicans on the right. And now they're even starting to go, okay, what the hell's going on with Trump now? Like everyone is. So it's going to be weird or interesting to see, do the factions who like the socialists and who are now turning against Trump, do they unite somehow in some weird way? That's just that would be, it's gonna be fascinating to watch, is my point.
Well, and that's the thing that I think is the potential linchpin of it's one of the potential linchpins of the fourth turning, is when you have everybody left or right saying it's rigged by the oligarchs. If you have the conservatives, the populists, the progressives, the wokes, the Democrats, if you have everybody saying that, and what do they argue against then? When that happens, they're not arguing against each other. Up until now, it's been left versus right, conservative versus liberal, or progressive versus populist. It's been these sort of internal push and pull. But you get everybody lined up and say, the oligarchy, the system is rigged. Then you've got the people versus the machine. You've got, and that is the scale of that is huge. The scale of that is so big that that's where you could see a change in the fundamental system of how we run everything.
Yeah, I'm going to read you this post on X that I think kind of encapsulates. I don't even know who this guy is. He's not a big name, but I thought he kind of encapsulated the conservative reaction this week. So, he said, I'm told it's now actually America First to want 600,000 Chinese students here because Trump now came out and said we need more H-1B visas here because we need the talent. And the reaction is like, oh, so Americans aren't like they're kind of maybe overreacting and do a good job of explaining this. But essentially, he said we need the talent. They have the talent. We have to import the talent because we don't have the talent. Is essentially what he said in this interview with somebody on Fox News, right? So I'm now told it's actually America First to want 600,000 students here. I'm told it's now America First to believe we need more H-1B Indians because Americans are incompetent. I'm told I'm not a real supporter of the president because I want answers on Epstein. I'm told I'm a Nazi because I don't want Israel influencing our government. Who's advocating for me in office? Virtually nobody. The average American is struggling to afford their groceries, power, insurance, rent, mortgage, car, gas, and child expenses. And, goes on to say, voting harder hasn't changed a thing. And I'm tired of pretending we just need to trust the plan and vote Republican. So, and again, I think this kind of encapsulates, very well articulated, the argument they're making. Okay, we threw the Trump Hail Mary. It's not turning out how we wanted. I'm out.
Yeah, it's the feeling. It encapsulates the feeling, the entire society's feeling. And when the entire society feels one way about the incapability or the corruption of the entire ruling of the society, that's when you have revolution of some sort or other. So I think that's, I don't know the numbers, but yeah, that makes perfect sense to me, that when you've got everybody left or right, rebelling against the system, then you're definitely going to have the potential for collapse. The only thing that could save us from that potential of collapse at that point would be World War III.
An external intervention significant enough to overshadow these concerns.
Yeah, that's right. Well, what a pleasant way to think about things.
So I think to speak to Kenny G directly now, the guy we're talking to 70 years from now, or Katie G, whatever.
Right.
The only people who are content and happy right now are the ultra wealthy.
Yes.
I think that's a pretty fair. Yeah. Everyone who's not ultra wealthy is pissed about something right now and feels a level of unfairness about something, whether it's economic or who goes to jail and who doesn't, how much fairness there is in the system, in legal protection and status and desire for your needs to be addressed and served, and how easy it is for you to just get along in life.
Right.
And everybody's pissed except for the ultra wealthy.
Right. Well, I would say the ultra wealthy and the people that have their hands on the levers of power, because it doesn't matter if you have the money or if you control the money. It's the exact same thing. So there's plenty of people, I think in DC in particular, maybe they're not billionaires, but they control billions of dollars. And so those are the people, they are oligarchs, just like, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and all the rest.
Yeah. And it seems like it's like sitting on the beach and just watching waves come in. There's periods of calm, and then there's a big wave comes in, and there's a period of calm, and then a big wave comes in. And on the ocean shore, the wave comes in every 7, 12 seconds, whatever it is.
Right.
We might go a few weeks, like a couple weeks ago, hey, it's actually been pretty quiet recently. And then this week, there's just this onslaught of revulsion.
Yeah.
Of people just being like, what the F is going on?
Right.
And then you have the Mamdani thing, and there's these. It's just this tidal. There's just the waves splashing on the beach of calm and then big thing, and calm and then big thing, and they get hung up on the government shutdown. Nobody cared about the government shutdown.
Right.
People do care about Epstein. People do care about floating a 50-year mortgage instead of saying, hey, when you look at a chart of how much the average house costs versus the average income, it's widening at a pretty staggering pace since 1974 or whatever year it was.
Right.
Nobody wants to talk about how to solve that problem.
Yeah.
It's all these Band-Aid things. We just kick the can down the road and borrow more money and And until we're just like, the plan is hope. We just hope that something comes along to save us.
Well, I think the plan for a lot of folks is, one, I got a good bomb shelter, or two, I'm in my 80s. I'll be dead before the thing comes to, I got to pay the piper on this. That's a pretty depressing, prognosis for society. But there you are.
I'm just finding it interesting that in the current moment, everyone is pissed except for the wealthy. It's not a right or left thing anymore. I don't think.
Exactly right.
It's right or left on what they think the solution is. There's no question about that.
Sure.
But it's not right or left about who's happy or who's unhappy. Everyone feels the cards are stacked against them.
Right. Well, and this is then what brings about the potential of the gray leader, the person in the fourth turning who, when the whole system is broken, leaders on the right and the left are not getting the job done. Then you're going to look for somebody outside to take you through to a better outcome. The problem, of course, with that is the problem of the South American dictator who fights against injustice, fights against unfairness and economic oppression, and then ends up being just as bad as the one before. So,
you and I have talked about this before. 10 years from now, we will all be unified like we were in 1952. Whether or not we're unified in a open market country or a socialist country, that is yet to be determined.
That is still up in the air. We don't know the answer to that.
All right. Well, anyhow, certainly fascinating to watch it all unfold. It's not always fun, but it's certainly fascinating to watch just the human dynamics move, in various different currents and things like that. So,
well, I do think the benefit of like our podcast and things like the fourth turning, et cetera, is it helps you to know that it's not, and the communication to Kenny G is, it may seem chaotic, but it's relatively predictable that this is going to happen. And there is a strong possibility, at least, of a, resurgent, new unified society afterwards. There's at least a strong possibility, and hopefully it will be good. So at least it's not complete chaos.
Yeah. We've talked about this for a long time. It's like going through a divorce. You wouldn't ever want to, but after you go through, you're like, yep, that really sucked, but it's the best thing that could have happened.
Right.
And I think that we'll look back on this the same way.
Yep.
All right. Well, onward we go.
That's what I'm pondering.
Trudging along through the snow, waiting for the winter to pass, right?
Yes, winter. Yeah. Winter is coming. It's Game of Thrones. Winter is coming.
Yeah. Well, as Dave, if there's anything we talked about that's especially on point or especially wrong, we'd love to hear about it. Again, we're trying to explain to future generations what this moment in time was like, as they undoubtedly look back and wonder what the hell's wrong with those people. You can do that Unsilent podcast. We can get your feedback there, or Rumble has a great comment section. And until next week, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.